Hey, Bert. Yeah, Ernie. Have you seen Emily? Well, why are you going and asking me something like that? Because if I don't find her, we're both going to be speechless. There you go, Ernie, making up stories again. No, she's the one who has to make up the stories, and now I don't know what to say. All right, well, how about this? I'm Bert, and I'm Ernie, and you're watching Hudson Valley WXYZ with Bruce the Blog. For a second, you thought that Bert and Ernie were going to do the whole show, right? Well, they could, as far as I'm concerned. It would be better hosts than I am, maybe. Anyhow, Hudson Valley WXYZ with Bruce the Blog is brought to you by Chase Media Group. And I'd like to thank the CEO of Chase Media Group, Carla Chase, and the Chief Strategy Officer, Frank J. Rich, for producing the show. And by the way, you can see all the past episodes on YouTube by searching Hudson Valley WXYZ or Bruce the Blog. And if you are new to the show, Hudson Valley WXYZ is a program that brings you unique individuals in the community who are making really valuable and interesting contributions to our quality of life. And we also like to explore and comment on issues and topics that are important to us all. And the reason that Bert and Ernie opened the show, and it, by the way, it was my honor that they opened the show, is that our guest, as you saw on the title card, is someone who is now the longest running writer on Sesame Street, Emily Kingsley. Emily, it's a thrill to have you.
Hi, Bruce. I'm happy to be here.
Right. And so I should just explain a little bit, because there's a backstory, so to speak, to the opening of the show, which I had a lot of fun doing, is that when our late son Harrison was an infant, as I was telling Emily, he would not go to bed until his crazy dad, did just what I was doing at the opening of the show. I just would improvise, and I think he was still in his crib even when I was doing this. I would improvise a little Bert and Ernie thing, and Harrison would not go to bed, not only until I did it, but until I completed the skit. If I stopped too soon, he would start to cry again. So it was really a lot of fun and brought back really fond memories for me to be able to do that at the beginning of the show. And it really is great to have Emily Kingsley here. I mean, who hasn't been influenced by Sesame Street? I mean, it's a phenomenon not only of television, but of popular culture and beyond, right? I mean,
and how prescient that WXYZ is such a perfect little segment of the alphabet.
Oh, that's right. That works really well, right?
Excellent.
Yeah. So, Emily, let's start off. I know there's a couple of different areas we want to talk about, and you know, even beyond Sesame Street, other things that you've been a champion of over the years, and some things we have in common. We became very quick kindred spirits, it seems,
Indeed.
which I really appreciate and treasure, by the way. And I want to mention that Emily has won an amazing 22 Emmys as a writer on Sesame Street. But let's, at least for a little bit, go back before then. How did you get started, in this field?
I had been working in television for several years when Sesame Street came on the air. But interestingly, I had never been a writer. I had never written anything.
Really?
Never. I had worked in production, I had worked in research, I'd worked in editing, I'd worked on the Dick Cavett show, I'd worked on a bunch of game shows, I'd worked with the esteemed Sir John Gielgud on a Shakespeare, I'd done a lot of stuff.
So on the production end?
On production, on all sorts of things, but I'd never done any writing, but I was out of work. I had been working on a game show that got canceled, so I was out of work when Sesame Street came on the air. So I had a chance to watch it. It had a lot of publicity, a lot of press when it came on the air. And I simply fell in love. I said, that's where I belong. That's just my kind of show, my kind of sensitivity, my kind of humor. I loved kids. And I said, I just need to be on that show. And I just wanted to, I would do anything.
So, and that was as a viewer?
As a viewer.
Just as a viewer,
I'm just
right?
sitting at home watching the show.
So you didn't know anybody who...
Well, I knew, interestingly, I knew the cameramen.
Okay.
The technicians on the show were guys that I had worked with on a game show.
Right.
You remember Supermarket Sweep?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. That was a great show.
Well, the Supermarket Sweep guys worked on Sesame Street.
Okay.
So I wangled an interview on production on the floor. But they didn't need anybody. It was brand new. They were fully staffed in absolutely everything. I had a whole bunch of interviews. I literally would have done anything to get on that show.
Right.
I tried production. I tried editing. I tried research. I went to the puppet people and I said, "Let me sew." I would have done.
So those are Jim Henson's people.
Henson's people. I went to everybody I could get an interview with. I would have swept the floor. I would have wiped off the tables. I'd have done anything to just get in.
Right.
And then I figured I would find my niche somehow. Turned out it took me 9 months of pestering them.
Wow, but that's perseverance.
Truly, I was so determined to get in there. Turned out that the only thing they couldn't find anybody to do was write the show, because it was very hard.
Well, that is, I would have never thought that.
I know.
What, they didn't have anybody to write it?
Well, no, it's very difficult. It's difficult to write curriculum, because we were teaching. The shows in that at that time was 8 segments, each one of which was 3 minutes long, had to teach according to their very specific curriculum, had to be funny, and had to be comprehensible by a 3-year-old.
Well, that is quite a challenge.
I mean, it was very specific, and it was very hard. And the comedy writers in Hollywood had not been writing that sort of thing.
Right. Yes.
Drama writers weren't writing that.
So in other words, you couldn't just pull things out of thin air.
Yeah,
right?
you couldn't find Law and Order writers weren't writing that sort of thing. I mean, or whatever people in 1970, you couldn't just say, send me 10 writers who write this sort of thing. Nobody was writing this sort of thing.
Right.
But I had been watching the show twice a day for 9 months. So I had been learning it. I'd been, meticulously studying it.
Wow.
So when they gave me an opportunity to write some audition pieces, they were okay. And so
they liked them.
They liked them, and they hired me.
That is a great story.
So that's how it happened, and I feel very, very blessed and very fortunate that it worked, and I've been there ever since. It's 45 years.
Yeah.
Who do you know that's been on the same job for 45 years?
That's incredible. It really is. The whole story is great because it really is, appropriately enough for Sesame Street, an object lesson in perseverance and focus and ambition. And like you said, you didn't even have any credentials.
I had no credentials whatsoever. I mean, I'd been in the business for several years, but never doing that.
But you obviously had the skills and the talent and the wherewithal and the drive, and that's what they say.
Well,
it's
I was determined.
You
may say
drive accounts for a lot when you're looking for a job.
I was determined to be there, and I'm so fortunate because I've loved every minute of it ever since. But it's still hard. It's very difficult work.
Sure.
Very difficult work, but very gratifying because you really, really feel that you're doing something very good. I sometimes describe myself as a woman with 9 million children on any given day.
Yeah, right.
So I really
is that what the audience is?
Approximately
9 million.
We never really know, but we estimate.
Well, why wouldn't you know? I mean, it's on public television, but why wouldn't you know?
It's very hard because the rating services, Nielsen and so on, don't count people under 3 years old.
Really?
Yeah. Don't ask me why, but they don't. And that's the people that we're serving.
I guess they figure they're not going to go out and buy anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's right. And those are the people that we're talking to. Right. And but on top of that, we're in 141 different countries around the world.
And it's
that
also
feels good.
and in syndication too.
Yeah, and also nowadays, it's very hard to find out where the kids are getting it from. They're not.
I was going to ask you about that.
Huge
Right?
numbers of kids are not getting it from television anymore.
Computers and
Yeah, they're
all kinds of-
streaming it and from these handheld devices, and we don't even know where they're getting it from. It's not like a time slot anymore.
Right.
They can get it whenever they want. I mean, it's
no, you're right. It's
all kinds of technology that I don't understand.
It's totally unhinged, as you say, from a sense of time and place, and
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. But it still seems to be iconic, and
no,
Cookie Monster is well known, and Big Bird is well known, and Elmo.
And the movie, something I love the movies. I mean,
the movies are.
I mean, I think the movies are so clever and funny for adults, let alone for children. I mean, really.
Well, that's an interesting thing because we have studies that indicate that kids learn a whole lot more when they watch with somebody.
With an adult?
With an adult present
Really?
who can reinforce stuff, who can point stuff out to the kids. And so we have always laid in this second level of humor, this adult stuff. Like we do these parodies.
Yes,
we did Upstairs, Downstairs, and Upside Downton Abbey, and we've done parodies.
So you're saying you do this on the show? Or?
Oh yes, we've done this intentionally from the very beginning.
Right.
Our takeoffs on Oklahoma and the 400 Blows and Me Claudius and I mean all the stuff.
Very sophisticated adult programs.
The kids.
Me Claudius. But remember, I Claudius, which was a great
at the time that the stuff was on. I mean, even to this day, we did Mad Men.
Right.
We did Mad Men.
Right.
Now the parents who are watching Mad Men, but for the kids, we did a bit, we're happy men, we're sad men, we're mad men.
So it's emotions, about emotions.
So it's about emotions. For the kids watching, it's a bit about different labeling emotions.
Right.
The curriculum goal for that segment was about labeling emotions.
Right.
But for the parents, the puppets were dressed to look like John Hamm and to look like
the actors, the characters.
And so
on
the
Mad
parents
Men,
watching got a huge kick out of it. We did True Blood. It was True Mud. It was for Oscar the Grouch. It was True Mud. It was hilarious.
Right.
We did Glee takeoffs. We've done takeoffs on every popular thing that was in at the time, to to encourage parents to be watching with their kids, because it's in our interest to help the kids learn more if there's somebody along with them. We have studies that prove that helps the kids.
It makes sense. I mean, there's a logic to it. There must be no higher praise for the original shows and the creators than to be parodied on Sesame Street, right?
And look at all these celebrities who love to be on the shows.
So what are some of your experiences with the endless parade of celebrities that have been on over the years?
Well, I've had a wonderful time because, and this is something that you and I have talked about a lot. I get assigned the celebrities who have disabilities.
Right. Yes. Right.
So I had a wonderful time writing with Christopher Reeve.
Yeah. Oh, right.
I had a marvelous time working with Christopher Reeve, talking about his disability.
Right.
I wrote for Itzhak Perlman.
Right.
But I mean, I've done others too. I did Isaac Stern, and I did Renee Fleming, and now 3-year-olds don't know, and I did Harvey Fierstein, and I did, they don't necessarily recognize, but they might know some of the big rock stars.
Sure,
who come on. They might not. But this is another draw for their parents.
Of course,
the parents of our kids
Right.
now,
Right.
let's see, a parent of a 3-year-old might be in their upper 20s or young 30s. This is really fun.
Right.
This is fun for the young parents to see some of these hot celebrities come on the show doing really silly, goofy stuff.
So when you're writing for a celebrity on Sesame Street, do you meet with them and talk about what they want, what their interests are, what they want to?
You can do that, or you can simply say, "We're writing to this curriculum, and this is
your role.
This is what you're going to do."
Yeah.
Or you do Patrick Stewart with a letter B. to be or not to be, a bee or not a bee. This is a letter B. It was hilarious. It was, it was hysterical. And we did Robert De Niro talking to a cabbage.
Right.
It was,
You're talking to me, right?
Are you talking to me? So I mean, they have a lot of fun with it, and everybody's very good-natured about it. And we had, I could go on and on about. We've had 4,000, I think, different celebrities.
I don't doubt it. That would be maybe 100 a year, right? Something like that. And when you first started, Emily, when you were talking about how you just sort of wrangled your way in there. Now, at that point, was Children's Television Workshop already in existence as the production company, or right? Joan Gans Cooney
developed it for this purpose.
So it was already from the outset. They were producing it. Yeah.
They organized in order to produce it.
Right.
Yeah, that's what they did.
So that's really who you worked for, was Children's Television.
Yeah.
Or you still
it's now called Sesame Workshop.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And back then, I remember WNET. Right, wasn't it WNET in New York? And was that the only station it was on at the beginning? It wasn't national at first, was it? Or I don't know.
I think it was, on a whole bunch of public television stations.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, individually, right.
Yeah. But the problem with that is that public television stations can slot you on wherever they want. If you're on a show on NBC, if you're Cheers or you're Friends or a regular, you have a time slot. You're Tuesday night at 8 p.m.
It's controlled by the network.
That's right. Well, PBS isn't like that.
Right.
Any station manager
can put it on whenever they want.
Yeah.
Like 3 in the morning if they want.
Exactly. Right. And so and sometimes Sesame Street, they think is old hat or something. They put it on whenever they want to.
Right.
So that's another problem with getting ratings.
Right. And I guess also, speaking of how it differs from commercial television, is in the budget, right?
That's exactly
right. You rely on
right.
fundraising and government grants. So how is that?
Merchandising, and that's why for the first 7 years we were very lofty, and we were not going to do any products.
Oh, really? No licensing?
No licensing whatsoever for the first 7 years.
Then I wouldn't have the Bert and Ernie puppets if that was the case, right?
Exactly. There weren't even any books or anything in the beginning, and then we finally came around. We say, okay, we're going to do quality-controlled educational projects only, and we started doing books and we started doing games, but no pajamas or wastebaskets or lunchboxes, and finally we had to bite the bullet and realize that we were going to go down the tubes if we didn't make a little money.
Right.
So, the realities are that we are now, dependent upon, totally dependent.
Huge, right.
Because there's no government funding anymore. There's
nothing?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not knowledgeable about this. This is not my area.
Right.
So I can't talk knowledgeably about where the money comes from. But I know that we rely on the merchandising.
Right.
So the Elmo dolls is where it comes from.
And Disney owns it, right? Disney owns the rights, I believe.
I don't know.
To the licensing, I'm pretty, because I used to be in that business. And of course the theme parks too, the Sesame Street.
Now we have Sesame Place.
Right, Sesame Place, right, yeah. Right.
Which is wonderful. It's a wonderful place.
Yeah.
But everything that we do is so quality controlled.
Oh yeah.
It's so good. It's not cheap, and it's not everything.
Well, it's the gold standard, obviously, for children's entertainment and
you can't imagine what they go through to make sure that the Cookie Monster is the right color, and that nobody does it with the wrong color, and nobody does it with the.
I mean, the whole licensing business is like that. They keep a very, very short leash on their licensees.
That's right.
And they'll cut you off, in a second if you don't conform. So we were talking before we actually went on the air about some of the issues that you've dealt with over the years and that are now being addressed as well, which are all of their time, so to speak. So, for example, you're talking about gender balance or racial diversity, and you also mentioned, which has been going on continuously, that you specialize in disabilities. So let's talk about that and about your own experience with that.
This is something that was, close to my heart. When I was at Sesame Street, after about 4 years, my own son was born with Down syndrome.
Jason, right?
Jason, and I realized with a jolt actually, instantly, the night he was born, watching television, the wasteland and the absolute absence of representation on the media of people with disabilities. That all of a sudden people like me, people like my family, were not represented at all.
So this was in the early 70s
74.
when he was born.
He was born in 74.
Right.
And there just wasn't anybody on the air who looked like my family. There were no kids on the air who looked like my kids.
Although, remember the show with...
Life Goes On.
Right, with Matthew Broderick's father. Remember, wasn't he the father on it?
The father on it was Bill...
oh, okay, no, I'm thinking of a different show with, remember Matthew Broderick's father, James Broderick. He was on a show like that, but you're right.
Right.
And there was a young man on the show. The son had Down syndrome.
Yeah, and his name was Chris Burke, and I got him that job.
Oh, really?
That was not until much later.
90s, maybe? Or?
Yeah, it was not until Jason was 13 when...
Late 80s.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Because that job was offered to Jason, and
oh, really?
It's a long story. We don't have time to. I'll tell you that story, but that's for another time. But Chris Burke got that job and did absolutely gorgeously
you
with
advocated for him.
Yes, I recommended him for that job.
Right. Great. And, that's great.
Yeah, and he did a beautiful job with that job. Jason was not old enough for that.
Right.
And Chris was about 5 years older, and he was right for it. Jason was not right for it.
So the character, though, was the character written that way?
For Life Goes On?
Yes.
Yeah, it was written for him. It was written for Chris.
Okay, right. But I'm saying, before you advocated having him on, was it supposed to be a child with Down syndrome?
For that show?
Was that the writer's idea?
For Life Goes On?
For that show, yes.
Yes, it was written for Chris.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but that's many years later.
Right.
Many years later. But when Jason was born in 74, there was zero. There was nothing. And then when Jason was born, and we were told never to expect anything of him, that he would never read or write. By doctors.
By doctors.
That he would never, we were told he'd never walk or talk or read or write, or that he would never recognize us as his parents, and that we were told that.
How old was he?
When he was born?
Newborn.
Newborn.
They said that when he was newborn?
Yeah.
Well, how would they know that?
Because they were stupid. Because they,
no, and that's my point. Is like, why would
because
say
that
something?
was the standard recommendation that doctors gave in those days for people with Down syndrome. That was because centuries of misinformation and centuries of bigotry and
so that was their reflexive answer, basically.
Exactly. And most people who had children with Down syndrome in those days were told exactly that you send your child away to an institution and you go home and you tell your friends and family that the baby died in childbirth. That's what we were told.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not kidding.
What? That's what they said?
That's what they said to us, and they said that to most people who had babies with Down syndrome.
It's like the Dark Ages.
Yeah, it was the Dark Ages. It was exactly that. And somebody said to us, and this is 1974, somebody said to us, there is a social worker said there is something very, very new, very experimental and very controversial. It's called early intervention. And some people believe that if you work with these children and you give them a very enriched and enhanced educational experience, that maybe they can be taught to do some very, very fundamental, basic things, like maybe he can be taught to feed himself. If you really, really work hard with him, maybe he can be taught to feed himself. Would you like to take him home and give it a try? And on that basis, we took this child home and started working with him. And he turned out to be very, very bright.
Functional.
Not only functional, but he was reading when he was 3.
Okay, right.
So, so they were all nuts, and they didn't know what they were talking about.
But the part of the point being,
I'm
Emily,
digesting
you took it,
a whole lot because we don't have a whole lot
but
of
you
time.
took it upon yourself to not accept
the doctor's advice.
The standard issue
of centuries of doctors.
Diagnosis and prognosis. And,
and if you look at all of the literature of the time, this was the standard.
Right.
what was in the literature of the time.
The sad part is it also speaks of taking the path of least resistance, right?
That's right. But and at that time, there were dozens and dozens and hundreds of families who, your doctors tell you what to do, and that's what you do. They take two of these and call me.
What other choice do you really have?
We are trained and taught, in our culture that doctors know best, and doctors are very smart, and they're
also human.
Unfortunately, but they tell you what to do, and you do it, and my heart breaks for all the decades and centuries of families who just listened and did it, and all the potential in all of those young people with Down syndrome who might have been educated,
been able to be more productive and happier. Yeah.
So we had this kid who turned out to be extremely bright and learned like crazy and started reading when he was 3, and I find myself on an educational television show with a kid with Down syndrome who's reading at 3, and I put the two of those things together, and I go to my producers and I say, hey, can we put this kid on the air and show America that kids with Down syndrome are able to do stuff that nobody ever thought they could do? And they said, sure, why not? Let's try it. So we put Jason on the show, on Sesame Street, doing academic stuff.
Right, that's great.
So he's doing D is for dog, J is for Jason. We did a whole bunch.
And what year was this?
This was 1977.
Okay.
He's 3.
Right.
He was cute as a button. And he's doing D dog. And Cookie Monster says, and what does the doggy say? He says, woof. Okay. And
did you write? You wrote that?
Yeah. And the mail started coming in like crazy.
Wow.
Parents started writing into the show saying, oh, I have a kid like that, and I never know it, and I never thought that my kid could do that, and I'm going to start working with my kid. And
wow.
And then people started writing, I never believed that my kid has been watching the show, and all of a sudden my kid with Down syndrome is reciting the alphabet.
Right. Yep.
It was phenomenal.
Wow.
It was so at that point in my life, I went crazy. I just went for broke, and we started putting Jason on the show a whole lot, and then I went to them and I said, if not only Jason, why can't we put on a whole lot of other kids with disabilities? I started doing a whole lot of stuff with the deaf. We started having a sign language word of the day.
Yep.
We would.
So you changed. You changed Sesame Street in that respect. I mean, and a lot more. You changed, a lot more in terms of being one of the leading champions of not only Down syndrome families, but people with disabilities, right? Which, and now we have to start to wrap it up, Emily. But I just have to ask, because of my experience with our late son Harrison, who had a usual form of dwarfism. Have you had little people, as we call them? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Peter Dinklage, has he ever been on? He's a great actor.
Peter Dinklage has been on Sesame Street.
Game of Thrones, great actor.
He has been on Sesame Street. We've had people with osteogenesis imperfecta on the show. We've had, you name it.
Right.
They've been on the show. And when I did Christopher Reeve, and I talked to him, and I said to the producers, I said, kids are often advised by their parents, don't ask, don't stare, don't. I said, no, that's all wrong. We want kids' questions to be answered. Kids are entitled to have their questions. So we did a whole thing, and I spent a whole afternoon in his house. I said, I want to do a bit with you where we ask about your chair, and we ask about your tracheotomy, and we ask about how does your chair work, and And we met these questions head on. It was beautiful. So, this has been my passionate crusade for over 40 years on Sesame Street, and I think that Sesame Street has been the leader in children's programming.
I think that's a vast understatement. That's the understatement of the last 40 years. So anyhow, Emily, thanks so much, and we're going to have you on again. We'll stay in touch anyhow.
I'll be delighted to be back anytime you ask me.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun and very educational and informative and
It's been my pleasure to be with all three of you.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily, for telling us what to say for 45 years. And thank you for watching. And thank you for watching Hudson Valley WXYZ with Bruce the Blog. And remember, when Bruce the Blog listens, people talk.